and then just hit. Good morning or good afternoon. My name is Kevin Shores. I'm part of the Lean Six Sigma Black Belt team at the University of Minnesota Medical Center Fairview. This is our first live meeting recorded for Fairview Labs and for the System Lean team. And the topic today is flowcharting, picturing the process. I would like to thank Lisa Novak and others from what was previously called the Org Learning Department at Fairview, who did the initial slide development for this training. So course learning objectives, when we're done today, upon completion of the course, you should be able to define a process, create a flow chart, utilize the correct symbols used, and drawing a flow chart. Can not be a problem for us when we're done with this today. So what is a process? We're talking about processes, but not individuals. So for some staff, they might be used to this. For others, this is a new concept. When we start to talk about process, really what we want to ask the question on is, do we have a standard process, or is each individual doing their own? Our goal really is to move towards having standard processes. So why create a flow chart? You can see these bullet points on the screen. It allows you to identify flow or sequence of events in a process. It applies to any process, gives all users a common reference, and again, focuses on the process. This is not about people. And if you also think about it, most of us tend to be visual, and if we can see a graphic with standard symbols, the likelihood of us reading it and really using it in day-to-day application is probably higher than maybe having a policy or procedure that's very text-dense with a lot of long paragraphs, kind of dense. People tend to use those a little less. So again, the other piece with workflows is really what we're trying to do is graphically roll out what we actually do. We want them to be real. So here's a fun example to start with. Getting up in the morning. Good place to start. Would you say this would describe what happens when you're waking up in the morning? If you start in the upper left-hand corner and then move across to the right, does that look like your workflow in the morning? Shortly, we are going to be talking about the special significance of the symbol shapes on the slide, so that's coming. But here's our example. This is a process. It's not about a person. It's a standard process on getting up in the morning. Now, how to create a flow chart. Key message here, the team makes the decisions on what the start and stop points are on a flow chart, and we also want to make sure that the team includes the individuals who actually do the work that is going to be flow charted. We don't want to be building flow charts with secondhand information. It's really the engagement of the people who do the work. So again, that team participates in all these discussions. What are the boundaries of the process? What are the steps of the process? What are the sequence of the steps within the process? And then also using the appropriate symbols so others reading the chart will be able to interpret it correctly. Now, once the team has determined the process determined the process start and stop points, the degree of detail needs to be discussed, and that's oftentimes a moving target for folks. Typically, staying at a high level to begin with is a good idea. If the team feels more detail needs to be added, that's not a problem to do that, and that can be added as you go. Also, the way to do this is you start with big white easel paper, or sometimes it's called butcher paper, and Post-its. That's how you start with it. And you may also need some of the blue painter's tapes, because if you're having to tape that big white paper up on the wall, you don't want to inadvertently pull the paint off the wall. And also, as far as the team who currently do the work participating in the development of the workflow, it's also important that they're going to get back to their colleagues back where the actual work is being done and getting their feedback as well. Oftentimes, a facilitated feedback is better, meaning not just leave it up on the wall and ask colleagues to look at it, but to bring a small group of colleagues together and physically walk them through what is presented on the workflow and ask people to get the feedback in writing, so then it's going to be easier to bring it back to the team to look at that and say. So again, the start points, the inputs, the endpoints, the output, the team members all agree on that level of detail. And it's going to vary because it's really that question of needing to clearly understand the process and then identifying those problem areas. Macro, high level, detail, more micro, if you will. So the sequence of the steps. Here what we want to talk about is only writing one step per Post-it note. Very short statements. There's no grammar test on this. It doesn't have to be a complete sentence. It's really like a bullet point. So again, just one step per Post-it note, and make sure that the team understands we're working on what we call the current state. It's how things are done today. It's really important that we don't want to mix up current state, what we're doing today, with future state, where we want to go tomorrow with changes. So really important to remind folks, current state. So again, each step on a Post-it note, then we're going to be able to move those steps around since they're on those Post-its on that white butcher paper or easel paper. So arranging the steps in the order they're actually carried out. Now, if this is a first time for a team, we might find out that people do it a little differently. So that is part of that discussion of the sequencing. But again, the sequence is what is occurring in the process, not what it should be. It really needs to be current. And each step is written inside a shape that has a particular meaning. And that's what we're going to get to next. The shape in front of you, an oval. Ovals show materials, information, or action that starts the process or shows the result of a process. I think, to my mind, when I first got started doing this, you start with an oval, you end with an oval. So if you're looking at a particularly busy flow chart, if you can find those two, then you can understand where the start and end points are. So the rectangle box, a box or a rectangle shows a task or an activity performed in the process. Now, multiple arrows can come into a box, but generally the goal is there's only one output or one arrow that leaves each box. So when we're talking about using the regular size Post-its, that's that rectangle we're looking at that we do a lot of this work with. Now this diamond shape, the diamond shows a point in a process where a yes or a no question is being asked or a decision is required. So you just take that standard size Post-it, and instead of having it lined up as a square or rectangle, you just tip it on an angle so it's a diamond. Later on, as you're working on your process, you'll put arrows in, and you'll actually identify one with a Y for yes or N for a no. So others will be able to read the flow chart and know this is the next step when it's yes for that decision or question, or this is the next step when it's no. Drawing the flow chart. It's very useful when flow charts become more than one page to use this circle with the A on it. So a circle with a letter or a number indicates a break in the flow chart and that it's continued elsewhere on the same or a different page. Very complex workflows, it might be on that same page. Oftentimes, though, our workflows are going to go to more than one page. Another option you might want to consider, you can use standard paper, which is 8.5 by 11 size, or you can try legal paper, 8.5 by 14. So that might help if you can get it on one larger piece of paper instead of two smaller pieces of paper. But this circle with either the letter or the number really helps the reader go through the workflow when it jumps to another page. Drawing the workflow with the arrows in a direction. Now, you don't want to draw the arrows until you've walked through all your series and sequencing of Post-its a couple of times to make sure everybody's comfortable and they're in that right direction. So you want to hold off a little bit with starting to draw the arrows on in pencil on your easel paper or butcher paper. There are other symbols to use, but we're always going to have the ovals to start and stop, the squares or rectangles for process steps, and the diamonds for decisions. Then depending on flowcharts, you might be using these other symbols. So again, they're not always needed. It depends on the particular work you're making a flowchart on. And also when you look at the Visio software program, if you go into Visio and then pull down File and Shapes, you'll see some others. So here's some examples of that torn sheet of paper the CAN or computer tape for a computer database material, delays in a process.d. The cloud is kind of fun to use because it just identifies a concern that it's unknown, and it's really a graphic way to say, we need to come back and look at this more. So again, not all flowcharts are going to use these other symbols. Now, there's flowcharts, a different version. This is called a cross-functional or a swim lane flowchart. It's another version. It can also be called an integrated flowchart. What's nice about this is how the different roles or positions that are involved in the work are displayed. So this particular one, if you look across the top, reading from left to right, there's a column for patient, for physician, for HUC, for pharmacist, for nurse. So then it really jumps out. The process, still what we've talked about, starts with an oval, ends with an oval, process steps, one per rectangle, and a decision or question is that diamond shape. This type of integrated flowchart could also be tipped on its side, if you will. So instead of the columns of patient, physician, HUC, pharmacist, nurse, they could be rows. It's another version of a flowchart that in some situations when there's a lot of different positions or roles that touch a process, this is graphically an easy way to interpret that. Now, you can also see that flowcharts can start to become complex depending on the work or the number of roles or positions that are involved. What you can note in this example, too, look at the bottom of this example where it says key. What's nice is there are some symbols that are used here that not everybody would be familiar using. So it's nice they've put a key here so it explains to anyone who's viewing this workflow what the shapes and symbols mean. So again, very handy, but again, you're seeing start with an oval, end with an oval, rectangles for process steps. There's a lot of diamonds here. There's a lot of decisions. And then there's some other different shapes to use for this as well. And here's another example for us also. Here you can see those brightly colored yellow or green starbursts. You can also find these when you're ready to build it in Visio. You go to your Visio folder, open it up, File, Shapes, Visio Extras, and then this is actually called a blunt starburst. What's really helpful about this shape, though, when you see some part of the workflow that needs special attention, it's kind of a visual shout-out for you. And again, you can see you can enter text or comments within that special shape. But again, we're seeing this integrated flowchart. Here we're seeing it's on the left-hand side for the patient, the new patient scheduler, the physician, so the different roles for this integrated flowchart. We're still starting with an oval. We still have process steps one at a time on those boxes. We still see that our decisions are diamond-shaped. And again, we finish with the oval, so the start and the end. And then this is just this other example of the green starburst to really kind of give a shout-out to look and see and need to have more discussion on that. Using color can be really helpful, too. It makes it easier to read. We just need to remember who our customers are. Some folks don't have easy access to a color printer. Now, the other thing to consider, don't put the workflow into Visio until your team has gotten feedback from others and they feel like it's ready to put in the software program. Visio, it's kind of like riding a bike. You get better with practice. The other thing with Visio, not everybody has it loaded on their PCs. So for some extended team members, or other customers, you may need to actually save it as a PDF, and that way everyone can open that. So again, you just put a request into the Technology Service Center, the TSC, and request the Visio application. They'll install it for you the next time you log in as yourself and double-click on the Visio icon. It'll install, and you're good to go. And again, it's something you get better with practice. Now, testing the flowchart for completeness. Are the symbols used correctly? Are process steps identified clearly with understandable words? Do they have meaning to the people who do the work? Is each path complete? Arrows show flow and feedback loops are closed. validation with others in the process. Did we get feedback from not just the team members who built the workflow, but their colleagues who do the actual work back in the department? You also want to make sure to include the title of the workflow, the date or the date range it was built, and include the names of the team members who built that. And again, including the term current state on the title will help as well, so people will know, is this a current state workflow or a future state workflow? So again, before you start, things to consider, making sure you have the staff who do the actual work as part of the team. Oftentimes it's really helpful to not just have all the Post-its and the butcher paper or the easel paper in a conference room, but can you actually put it up on the walls where the work is being done? That allows you to walk the process to see what's going on. A term that's used in process improvement, gemba, it's a Japanese term for where the work is. Go to where the work is, go to where the workers are doing the work to make sure you're capturing it. Again, the getting feedback from other staff. And when you're done with all of that, then you transfer it into Visio. And we've already talked about the titling and the date on the workflow. And again, that piece about using that blue painter's tape with your butcher paper or easel paper, you don't want to pull the paint off the walls. Thanks for your time and attention today. I stopped it. So it's up there for save recording now. Hit OK.